Several years ago from Sechta Shabbos, and I am quite pleased to note, at least it was kind of smug, but my understanding of Yerushalmi has increased dramatically since learning the Sechta Shabbos. So I went back and looked at my marginal notes there and saw that I did not understand the sugya anywhere near as well as I understand it now. So it shows some progress, yes.
You may have changed that in your notes.
I do that I do it all the time. Yeah. Okay, whenever we come across parallels. We are up to Halacha Hey on page 62. These are those who are stoned. Okay? People are stoned to death. Abola Aim, somebody has relations with his mother. Balei Shesov, somebody has relations with his father's wife. Okay, which is his stepmother. Al-Kalo, somebody has relations with his daughter-in-law. Labala, somebody has homosexuality with a male. Valabeima, bestiality. Vaisham a woman who has relations with an animal. Hamagade, somebody who blasphemes. Somebody who is idolatrous. Somebody who gives his children to the specific form of idolatry called molech, where he used to pass the child between the two fires. Ubal Ov, fortune teller of some sort. You don't need another type of fortune teller. Somebody desecrates the Shabbos. Somebody who curses his father and mother with the name of God. Also somebody who has relations with a betrothed girl. A person who tries to missionize and seduce people to worship idolatry. Witches, sorcerers, the Ben Sora More, and the wayward son. Now, the Rabbi Shimon will argue on several of these things in the Mishnah here, but we're not getting into Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is one who holds burning is more severe than stoning. So he would put something such that what is into the category of burning, but we're not going to get into that. In fact, the entire Gemara we're going to see has nothing to do with the Mishnah. Okay, this Mishnah remains unexpounded upon by the Gemara, which we're going to do over the next two blocks. What?
Self-explanatory.
Yes, it is kind of self-explanatory. Says more, the lochen tzricha behele mechod. Now this is not going in our Mishnah. Okay, it's going in our Mishnah increases. The Mishnah increases is talking about a case where Gillian Ephraim brings it down, Pnei Moshe brings it down, everybody brings down Mishnah increases. Rabbi Akiva asked Ram Gamliel, if a guy has relations with his sister and his father's sister and his mother's sister, so the three sisters, but they're not all his sister, right? They're all his sister, and two aunts, father's side, mother's side. Okay, so how many prohibitions is he liable? How many korbanos does he have to bring? Is it all considered to be one name achos, sister, even though they're not all his sister, or is it several different al-chatos? Okay, so it says the Maralach and it's only a question where it was in one period of forgetfulness, right? He didn't really become aware in the interim, but about the prohibition. But if it's in 2 period of forgetfulness, of course 3. If it's 3 girls, so then obviously you're liable 3 korbanos, right? This is true certainly even by one woman. But let's say a woman who's a sister, right? Your sister, and you have relations with her 3 times, boom, 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 right? You have relations with her, and then you remember that she's prohibited to you. And then you remember that she's prohibited to you. Then you have come to have relations with her another time. Behelim, it should be acher. In the second period of forgetfulness, you're liable for each and every one, right? Rabbi Shimon prayed to Rabbi Hillel ben Pazi, boy, call me Rabbi Hillel ben Pazi. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Hillel ben Pazi, asked him by his father, Masniso bishacha sheish lo shemos harbe. Is the brisa referring to one woman who has who has several possible prohibitions, right? Let's say she's somehow she's a sister and a sister-in-law. I don't know exactly how it will work out, but to talk about one woman that several prohibitions upon her, Avlima Yunashim Harbe. But if there's several different women, and it should be Behelem Echad, there's 2 words missing, Behelem Echad, even though it's one period of forgetfulness, is it Ke? It says a V here, but it should be a Ke. That's for good in a front. Ke'alem Mosharbe Behelem Echaru. Do we say it's like the fact that it's separate women? Is that in of itself make it like separate prohibitions? Which is a question which we have parallels in the Bible in a couple of places. When you have 3 women, is that considered to be 3 different shemos, right? Is that 3 different, even though it's all Be'eli Mechotz, it's one period of forgetfulness? Or even 3 different women, if they're all like Rabbi Akiva's case, the Achos sister, right? Your sister, your father's sister, your mother's sister, so then they all join to be one. Amar Leisa, he said to back them, the father responded to the son, Lochein, no, not, or rather, Lochein, no indeed. Tzricha, the question is, in fact, but it should be, the Shaitan so throws in, Benoshim Harbe Be'elei Mechot, even by many women, okay? Even by many women, as long as it's Be'elei Mechot, there's a possibility that you're only liable one. Again, because they're all sisters. One's your sister, one's your father's sister, one's your mother's sister. It's a possibility. Okay? There's such a distinction. It's not so much a machlokas. Oh, it's a machlokas, yeah. There's a machlokas. Who Be'elei Mechot v'chamisha lemos? It's an interesting story. I don't remember this from the Bavli, but it's obviously in the Bavli because it says here on the side. But Krisus is not one of my strong Masechtas. But they have machlokas like this. Hu Be'elei Mechot, he had 5 relations with her, right? 5 times relations. He knew, for him was one period of forgetfulness. But she's a big Russia. She remembered between each time they had beer that he was prohibited on her. Okay? So, he was in one period of forgetfulness, and she was in 5. Rabbi Yochanan Mariel says, who may be korban echad? He brings 1 korban, because he was only one period of forgetfulness. She brings 5, because she remembered between each time the prohibition. The Rabbi Shimon says, just like he only brings 1 korban. She also only brings 1 korban. Okay? Not 5, only 1. So fascinating chiddush, right? Because the Chora you would expect he would have to bring 5, right? She would have to bring 5. Shelo Tomar, so here you don't say, Yasu Noshim Harbe, let's make a lot of women, and it should be here, Ke'alei Mosharbe Be'elei Mechot, that it should be like a lot of women on one Ha'alem in one period of forget. I'm sorry. Scratch that. Sorry. Shalot Omar. Let me go back a line. Shalot Omar Yasu Nashim Arbe. Again, it should be Ke'alem Mosarbe. You shouldn't say that it becomes vis-a-vis him like several different women. Now, by him it should be like several different women. Why? Because she knew each time. So since she knew each time that might make a distinction even vis-a-vis him. Let's say that we might be able to entertain the possibility that each time they have relations, since she knew in the middle, it's like 3 different women, right? So that's what it's telling us. Even that it's not true. Nobody holds that way. The whole machlok is whether she brings 5 or she brings 1. But everybody agrees that he only brings 1. No matter what, okay? So that's why it's possible to say, Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi says, Rabbi Hillel Bar Pazi says to his son Rabbi Shimon, that's why it's possible even to say it's 3 different women. As long as it's Be'elei Mechad, there's only one korban. There's only one period for forgetfulness, it's possible only one korban. Just like this case here, you have 5, it's like 5 separate women, because you remembered in between each one. Vis-a-vis him, it's only one korban. So too, it's 3 separate women, but it's only Shem Echad, it's one prohibition of sister, so it's possible that Ataka is only one korban. Okay? So it says the Gemara, that's why he has to tell us, that's what Rabbi Gamliel had to tell Rabbi Akiva when he asked him the question, even about 3 separate women, that you really chayev on each and every one. No, it did start shaila by 3 separate women. And the conclusion is, by 3 separate women, you're taka liable 3. But it was touch and go for a while. Because we see it in this case over here, where the woman remembered in between each time, that nevertheless in the final analysis it's only one korban for the man, not 5 separate korbanos. Okay? Says Ma'amar Ibun Bar Chia Tani Rabbi Shmuel came. Ibun Bar Chia said Rabbi Shmuel learned the following. Now this is where actually we pick up with Masechta Shabbos. The thing is that there's a big block missing here. Okay? Now, the big block missing here is brought up by the Pnei Moshe. I'm not going to read it inside, but it's by the bend of begins 5 lines before the Pnei Moshe becomes wide and then goes on. It says the principle is Kol Davar She'etz Min HaKlal Lamed Lo Lamed Atzmo Yotza Lamed Al Klal Kulo Yotza. Anything you add a generality says A. And then out of let's say like this. Let's say this: all erayis in the Torah, if you commit them, mechayev koris. And then Torah singles one out and says, and by your sister you're chayev koris. So it's superfluous, right? That's yotza mikal came out of the generality. It was specified, right? Why did it come to specify? So Bishmael says it comes to specify for the. If it either comes to a certain purpose, whatever purpose it comes for, there could be various different purposes, or it comes for the purpose of being mechalik, the purpose of saying that you're liable to koris even if you only commit one prohibition, or a korban. Only if you only commit one prohibition, you don't have to commit more than one, or all of them, or be chayav, whatever penalty you undergo. So the question is, what if you have 2 cases or to yotze, where it says, let's say, by your sister kores, and also says by your aunt kores. So what if you have 2? What does that represent? In other words, it says all rayas kores, and then it says you're by your sister kores, and it says by your aunt kores. What does that come to infer? Okay, so it says the Gemara. Amar Ibun Bar Chia time Rabbi Shmuel came. Rabbi Shmuel does following: Lo tenachshuv lo tonadu. It says, don't be involved in fortune telling, or don't be involved in soothsaying. But lo nichos b'inin b'chlal lo yu. They were all included in kisruf. The prohibition of Torah on sorcery. Why do you have to then tell us specific types of sorcery? It's obvious to us that there's sorcery is prohibited, right? The yotzu min haklal lachlok ala klal. It comes to they're taken out of the general principle to divide out the principle. But you might say a sorcerer, Chveis Harry Potter. He's only a chayiv if he goes to Hogwarts and he can do all the various different types of sorcery which they learn in sorcery school, right? Kamash, that's what the Pasuk has to tell us, no, any specific type of sorcery which you commit, any specific type of act, you're already liable. It makes no difference what it is, okay? So that's what it means. Now, even though the 2 psukim, the two things which are Yetzil Chalik, they already are, they're mechalik. Right? Klal be kores, and that means on the general category of kishuv you get kores, uprat, and in any specific nuance thereof, you get kores as well, because you get kores as well. Milsad Rabbi Yechanan Amara Now that's Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yochanan says this type of thing, yeah. No, not yet, because I skipped a word line. Oh no, I didn't. No, sorry. Yeah, Rabbi Yochanan does argue, but not. You'll have to see how he does argue. Okay, it's not so simple. Milsa Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan seems to hold the same thing. That's what the problem is going to be. Milsa Rabbi Yochanan, Klau Pratu. Klau Prat means also the same idea, which means that not a Klau Prat. No, we have the principle Klau Prat, which means usually Klau Prat aim b'Klau el mash b'Prat, that the Prat limits the Klau. But here it means that l'chalik, that in each and every specific case you get a chorus, and that's the case we're about to bring. The Marayvo b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, Marayvo Shem Rabbi Yochanan, ki kol asher yaseh mikol tevo seilo v'nichol. So this is actually a case I mentioned before. It says by Arayis, every type of rayas you get chorus, right? His sister was included in that general principle. So why did it say by your sister you get chorus? We know already you get chorus, right? Tells us that no matter what, you don't have to have relations with all the rights. You don't have to be so diligent. You have relations with one of the rights, we give you chorus, okay? Or God gives you chorus. Hey, so Rabbi Lezer asked like this. So far there is no machlokas, right? That's fine. Rabbi Shimon would agree with that. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva would agree about that. The question like this. Hey, so Rabbi Lezer asked on this. Vaksi, what is it? So what about that which it says? Ervas achos imecha, vervas achos avicha lo segale. And it says there you get chorus for your mother's sister and your father's sister. Why? Why need additional chiluk? Amalei, so he says there it's different. Now wait. Actually, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva don't concern us at the moment. And we'll come back to them later on. But this is what's going to concern us. Rabbi Yochanan holds any specific case comes to say that specifies. Rabbi Lezer is asking a kasha on him. It sounds like Rabbi Lezer doesn't hold that principle. Rabbi Lezer is attacking him from an additional specification. Now, we don't know yet what Rabbi Lezer holds, but it seems like Rabbi Lezer holds the specification doesn't come l'chalek to tell us that you get the penalty for each and every prohibition you transgress. Okay? So we're going to come back to that as well. Okay? So Rabbi Yochanan first answers him. He says in Tzarech Yotzos. No, that comes to tell us a specific halacha we need to know. Lidun ba'aroya. To tell us the concept of hara. That in order to be liable for error, you don't have to complete the relations, even if you just, make contact. Then you're ready chayav hara. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer is tenacious. He asks another question. What about that? What it says, if a man lies with a woman who is in nida, and reveals her nakedness, as makora her genitals he has contacted, she revealed the source of her blood, and then says there also they get chorus. It's another one. Why do we need that specification? Armalesa said, no, that too was Lutzorech. That's necessary as well. There's Rabbi Yochanan responding. Yotzes lidon ba'araya. It's also telling us that you're already liable with hara, with contact. Don't need to make a complete bia. Shalot Omar, don't say, the only time I think you need complete bia, if I recall correctly, is by, do you remember? No. Yibum might be two, to do Yibum. But Shivcha Charufa is the only time Yeah, shiur charufa, the partially released slave. So because it's a special limud there, I forget what it is. Anyway, Shalot Amar the Olio Veichayav Ele.
Is for sure. I think that's one of the questions because you're still being certain issues out by a raw, so yet going.
It's a mitzvah ba'avera type thing. Okay, so I think you're right about you. I'm pretty sure you're right. So it says Mashlot Olio Veichayav Ele Elam Mishum should be sure because of Tuma. They got the Araya. I might say Nida is a special prohibition. Nida's not nerva. The kid, if you have relations with your wife and she's a Nida, you get courage, but the kid is not a mamzer. The kid is a legitimate Jewish kid. So therefore, I might say that there is no, since Nida is a unique quality, it really is an Isser of Tuma, not an Isser of Arayas. So therefore, there is no liability for our raw. That's why you have to tell us that even by Nida, there's a liability for our raw, right? Nida also follows contact. You don't need a complete bill. Funkeit tzarich memra, that's what it has to say. They chayev on a ma'arez if you finish the bill. Now, but Rabbi Yochanan, again Rabbi Lezer plugs away. Wait a minute, folks, he will say, Vishar sheish kav is dodo so. A man who has relations with his aunt, thank you. Ervaz dodokila, he revealed his uncle's nakedness, and then there's chorus as well. How come? Armalate tzarachiot. So it's there too. It's unique. Leidum bariri, because it tells there now he doesn't get chorus, but he also gets ariri. Ariri is a higher level of punishment. Chorus is just death. Ariri is barrenness. Barrenness. Dam Rabbi Yehuda said, "Call aside the tema aririm yiyu." Any place where it says in Torah they will be aririm below vla. It means that from now on they won't have any kids. Call aside the tema aririm yamusu. Any place that says aririm they shall die. Korban's name they die. They bury any children they had till now. Okay, so that's why it says chorus over there. Rabbi Yossi said. Dodoso l'tzarech yotzos. Rabbi Yossi gives another answer. He says, you know what? You know why they had to single out your aunt? I'll tell you why. L'mayid, it comes to preclude as Eishes. Now here there's gear. The Shaita so changes the gear so as Eishes achi aviv me'imo. Okay, you got an old cup for this. This is like Yavoma's case. If you have you have an uncle. But he's only an uncle on your mother's side. No. He's only no. This is an uncle, your father's half brother. It's your father's half brother through a common mother, not through a common father. The way to remember that is that he has a different last name than your father, right? Your father's last name is Smith, and his brother's last name is Jones. They're brothers. Obviously, they share a common mother, but they don't share a common father, right? So, your uncle Jones' wife is not. You're not chayav kares on her. You're only chayav kares on your father's Smith brothers' wives, not on your father's Jones brothers' wives. Why? Because they're only related to him on the distaff side. They're related on the mother's side, not on the father's side. My time, how do we know that? Such a kavaldik chiddush. What difference does it make what kind of a half brother it is when you have relations with his wife? So it says my time and Nemar Khan. By the way, to tell you about it now, of course, if she's not Eishes at present, because then you're liable to death for Eishes, right? Your uncle is dead or divorced her, right? So now she's single. So my time and Nemar Khan, well, the reason is because it says here it should be dodo, uncle. The Nemar it says by redeeming a person who was taken into slavery by a goy. O dodo or ben dodo yigolenu. He should redeem either by his uncle or by his cousin. Ma dodo shenemar la'alon, and there the dodo, it's you know who has to redeem you when you're taken into slavery by a goy? Your relatives who are suitable to inherit you. Who are relatives who are suitable to inherit you? Only relatives via the father's side, not relatives via the mother's side. Because relatives via the mother's side, they can't inherit you. And your father's brother via his mother can't inherit your father. Because inheritance always goes after father's houses. So therefore, just like over there, the person who has to bail you out of slavery can only be your father's brother through a father. So to you, the Arias only applies to your father's brother's wife when he's a brother through a father, but not a father's brother's wife when he's a brother through a mother. Okay? So it says the Gemara after the social. Now Markan, so to the year would say about your aunt, Beishas Achi Aviv me Aviv Akosum Daber. The Pasuk about the father, the wife of your father's brother from a father. Right? Now, Av Eishes Achiv Limda Midoda So. Now also we learn out from that Eishes Achiv, that your own brother, you're only liable on his wife if it's a wife if it's a brother via a father. And this is actually a very big chiddush if you learn this way, but that's what Rabbi Yossi wants to say. If you have a half-brother, and he's only a half-brother through a common mother, not through a common father, in that case, Takeh, there's no prohibition on his wife. I mean, once he dies, you can marry his wife. It's an amazing thing, right? We don't paskin in this way. But that's what he wants to say. And wants to learn from Xer Shava. And Xer Shava, the Shari Teretz wants to claim, is Xer Shava Aririm. Okay? Because it says Aririm by both. Mado Dosu Shnemer La'alon, just like your aunt, Beishas Achi Aviv Me'iva Aviv Akosim Medaber, it's all has the dafka be your aunt, who's the wife of a father, of a brother to your father via a father, Afkan, so to here, Beishas Achiv Shnemer Makan, so to your own brother's wife, it's only Beishas Achiv Me'aviv Akosim Medaber. It's only talking about your father's your brother via your brother via a common father. Now says the Gemara, Ad Kidun Rabbi Akiva. This all goes well like Rabbi Akiva. Now, why is this going to Rabbi Akiva? Because Rabbi Akiva extrapolates, and this, by the way, the Gilin Ephraim only touches on it. Shad Yisrael goes a little bit more deeper than this is about focus we had a couple of times, but very broadly dispersed between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. The Bavli holds that which Rabbi Akiva holds, Rabbi Shmuel holds, Ein Lamedim Lamed Mina Lamed. If A taught you B cannot teach you C. Is only by Kodshim. Ein Lamedim Lamed Mina Lamed by Kodshim. But according to Yerushalmi, Rabbi Shmuel holds that way in Kol Torah Kula. Ein Lamedim Lamed Mina Lamed. If A taught you B cannot teach you C. Also, it's another machlokes to keep Rabbi Shmuel, Shas machlokes. No, the Bavli does allow it except by Kodshim. Yerushalmi never allows it. The other thing the other thing which is not a machlokes by Yerushalmi is that the Rabbi Akiva holds you can learn Xer Shava even if it's not mufneh, even if the words are not superfluous. Rabbi Shmuel holds you can only learn Xer Shava if the words are superfluous. So that both the Bavli and Yerushalmi agree. So the problem is like this: there's a double problem here, because you want to learn out your own brother's wife from your uncle's wife, but that in of itself is learned out from the parameters of inheritance, right? So you want to learn from inheritance, which is A, to your uncle's wife, which is B, to your brother's wife, which is C. So according to Shmuel, you can't do that. Furthermore, the Xer Shava of Aririm right? Because it says aririm by your uncle's wife, and it says aririm by your brother's wife. That's not going to work. That's not going to work with Rabbi Shmuel because it's not mufted. Those are not extra words. They have to be extra words, superfluous words. But they're coming to teach you the very issue of harirus, the penalty of barrenness. So they're not extra words. So how would you let out Rabbi Shmuel? So it says, well, I'll tell you, Tani Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel teaches us Nemra kan Eishes Achiv. The prohibition of Eishes Achiv is, I said before, I take back what I said before. I think we do paskin like this, which is an amazing thing. I don't know, maybe there's a different penalty for your half-brother's wife or it's only half-brother through mother. Because look, Rabbi Shmuel says the same thing. I should maybe look it up, but I don't remember. But anyway, because look at this. Rabbi Shmuel is quite logically in a different way. If it says your brother's wife is forbidden upon you, it says elsewhere, somebody who takes his brother's wife, nidahi. Your brother's wife is called a nida. What does it mean, a nida? Just like a nida is permitted after she's prohibited, right? She goes to the mikvah, she's permitted, right? So too, the brother's wife, which we prohibit upon you, is yesh lo heter. Is talking about a brother's wife which can someday be mutter to you. Yotzas Eishes Achiv Me'imo. This precludes your brother's wife. Your brother's wife, when it's a brother from the mother's side, she can never be permitted to you. Because your brother's wife, when it's a brother through a father, can be permitted to you via Hebrew, if he dies childless. But your brother's wife, when it's a brother through a mother, that can never become permitted to you. So therefore, the prohibition also only applies to that which can become mutter, not the one which is always usher. So I better look this up because this is very confusing to me. Eishes Achiv acquaintance is only by what? Yeah, but it's gotta be also. Makes no sense, right? So that's what sounds like for the Yerushalmi. That's what it is? Oh, that's good. Okay, that's coming. So you just diminish from barrenness. Where is it? Which one? Oh, so he brings it down from the Tosfos. Okay, so it's not your great p'tur. Just patters you up from this part of it. You don't get barrenness, but you get a bit nonetheless. Well, first of all, the Rambam says that Taka, your aunt, who's married to your brother, your father's brother through the mother's side, is an Issa D'Rabbanan, not an Issa D'Oraisa. So that is clear from our Gemara. Okay? So on your sister, so the Rambam distinguishes. He says, "Echad achiv mi'avi v'achiv mi'imo, bein misuin bein miznus, eishto erva olav. Aval eishes achi avi mina eim areish niya k'mo shebiyarnu." Okay, So yeah, so your own brother, the way we pass your own brother's wife is also upon you, whether it's a brother through the father or the mother. But your uncle's wife is only also upon you if it's your uncle through a common father with your okay. So that Marapanim is actually very, very important. Marapanim says when we're precluding, we're just precluding from barrenness, not from not from chorus. Okay, says more now. For Rabbi Yochanan Makshilo, look, that which Rabbi Yochanan said, he finds difficult. Who's he? Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar doesn't like the fact that Rabbi Yochanan. He asked that. We pointed this out. He asked Rabbi Yochanan every step of the way. He says, "How can you say that the specific prohibition comes l'chalik? What are you going to do with this one? What are you going to do with that one?" Yet there must be some reason for the specific prohibition to be singled out in each case. Minat teisele. So, and he's got to use it l'chalik as well. So how does he know l'chalik? He's asking Rabbi Yochanan, but he's got to hold the same way, so he's got to have a source on that too. Where does Rabbi Elazar know that when prohibition is singled out, they come l'chalik? So Rabbi Elazar said, "I'll tell you." He learns the same way. Don't worry. He learns out from here. Rabbi Elazar said, "Shtei lavin v'kares echad." If you have two prohibitions and one kares between the two of them, lavin chokes kares. The fact that you have two prohibitions, they divide up the kares. In other words, you only chayav kares for either one of them. You don't need both, which is the same principle which we're learning. My timer. Where do we have such a pasuk? It says, "Absar adam lo yisach." It says, if you take the toires, the incense, or whatever it is, the oil, I think actually, the oil, or the sharon rishon, the anointing oil, you may not put it upon your flesh. And you may not put it upon your. You can't make it in the same format. See if it says, "Ish asher yikach mi kamo." Somebody who makes the same format, Sharitim Menozar puts it on somebody other than Kohen. V'nichas me'amor, if he's going to be excised. Harekan shtei lavin v'kares achas. There's one kares. So, but there are two lavin. So we say it's not you have to both lavin in order to get the kares. If you commit one of the prohibitions, either making the same format or applying it to somebody else, then you get kares. So we see that lavin, specific lavin, carve up the prohibition and apply it. Vod minato. And I have another similar case. Shmuel bar Abba ba'ikon Rabbi Zira. Shmuel bar Abba asked in front of Rabbi Zira, "V'yatzu shlomim, v'yetzu shlomim, chalku kol kachim betuma." Interesting question. So look, if you eat a kazayas of korban, and you are tameh, you're liable to kares. The thing is, the Gemara in Krisus, which enumerates, the Mishnah Krisus, which enumerates all 36 possible Krisus one can get, enumerates all kachim together, lumps them all together. So it sounds like you only get one kares no matter how many korbanos you eat. The question is, there's a specific prohibition mentioned there's a generic prohibition mentioned by all korbanos, there's a specific prohibition mentioned by shlomim. Let that specific prohibition come and carve up the kares. I mean, for each korban you eat, when you're tameh, you should get kares, right, in and of itself, right? So let it carve it up, and there should be more than 36 creases. Because instead of just one generic one of korban, there should be one for shlamim, one for chatas, one for ola, one for osham. Should be 3 more, right? So it says, Amalei says no. There, l'tzorech yatzu. Tapalam gimelav. Shlamim was singled out for a specific purpose. But my kochi bedek abayis, in order to preclude kochi bedek abayis, nor to preclude, to say, Shlomi, that's the lowest level of sanctity which we have, which is a korban. And there's where the buck stops. If you eat Kodshe Mizbeach, Korbanos Petuma, then you get Kores. As opposed to, or as opposed to Kodshe Berkabais. By Kodshe Berkabais, animals which have a mum, they have a blemish, or they're not suitable to go to Zeh because it's like a deer or something like that. So even though it has sanctity, there is no prohibition on it, neither pigul nor nosor, nor of course our Reshutami. Now Rashai throws in here three words. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it appears as one of the parallel sugas in Shas. Rabbi Mona Ba. Rabbi Mona asks the question, okay? The following question. Is it not a brayso? The brayso says, Kachem Mizbeach, Mitztarfim Zeimze, the Kachem Mizbeach joined together, L'me'ilah, in other words, if you abuse a third of a kazayas of one, actually, Mila goes by prutus. A third of a prut of one, a third prut of another, a third prut of another. They all are, you're liable. Chayavim, you're also liable, mishum pigul v'noisar v'tomei. You're liable because of pigul, nosar, and tomei. So the way he reads the next line is, he takes on Mashenk B'Kochik Bedekabais, because that's obvious. Kochik Bedekabais, there's some people who know it already. He changes that, he changed the next line to, the Shayat Yisrael to, Mikev on Shein Mitzdarfin, not Einon, but rather Shein Mitzdarfin. Chokim, take out the second word Einon as well. You can fetch it into the language here as well. Mikev on Shein Mitzdarfin, actually, it doesn't require much of a fetch. The idea is, look, they joined together. Pigul, Nosar, and Tomei, of all Korbanos, joined together. For Mila, they joined together. What how do you mean? Do you possibly have to divide them? How can you say there's separate Kores for each one? Then they wouldn't join together. The Mishnah, it's a Brisa, I think it's a Mishnah, actually, that says that they all join together. So is it obvious that it's one prohibition? Now, the truth is, I have a little bit of difficulty with this question because Rabbi Shmuel Barba was saying, I have a problem with the pasuk, and Rabbi Mona can't really retort and say, okay, you got a problem with the pasuk, but the Mishnah contradicts the pasuk. This should be a more problem for Rabbi Mona. Rabbi Mona should say, Rabbi Mona should be confronted with the problem and say, okay, you got a Mishnah which says they all join together, which means that they're not separate prohibitions, but what are you going to do with the pasuk by Shlomim, which is Machalik? But that's not how Rabbi Mona looks at it. Rabbi Mona says, you got to change the pasuk. You got to say the pasuk's coming for a different reason. The pasuk's coming to tell us something about, to preclude Kodesh Berek Habayis, like we said on the top. Because the Mishnah itself clearly indicates that they all join together. It's a funny way of learning, but that's the way he learns it. Rabbi Chanina said, "V'chein he." This is in fact you missed the point of Shmuel Bar's question. V'chein he tzrichole. This is what he's asking, which is exactly what I asked you just a moment ago. It says, his question is based on the pasuk. The Mishnah is difficult. You're asking him for saying, well, based on the Mishnah, you have to distort the pasuk. No, because the pasuk, the Mishnah has a problem. How can the Mishnah say they're all one prohibition, they all join together? The pasuk seems to indicate that they're separate prohibitions. Okay, so be that as it may, the bottom line is that Lemaisa, the premise was that Shlomi bring is that we see from here that the premise is true even according to Rabbi Elazar, that whenever you have a specific prohibition which comes along, that specific prohibition is brought there l'chalik, it singles out and chops the generic category, such in this case eating kosher mituma, into specific issues, and unless we found some other use for the pasuk by shlamim, it would have meant you are chayav on each and every korban eat mituma. Okay? Says Mark, Rabbi Lazar, Omer, Rabbi Lazar said, let's skip, sorry. Klabase, now we're on a roll. We're talking about a variation on the same theme. We're going to say a different machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Lazar. Klabase prat belosase. You have a cloud, the generic principle stated in a positive form, and a specific prohibition came out in a negative form. What's the story there? Rabbi Lazar learns that that's klal pratu. Indeed, in that case, it's the klal prat, meaning that lav it is mechalik, and there's going to be a major ramification for that, as we'll see momentarily. What's that? Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. How do we see such a manifestation of this machlokas? Rabbi Lezer malokin adei charisha b'shvisa. Rabbi Yochanan says if you plow during Shemitah today, you went down plowed the field. Today's Shemitah. You went down plowed in Eretz Yisrael. We'd flog you. Rabbi Yochanan in lokin adei charisha b'shvisa. Yochanan says if you plow during Shemitah, you don't get flogged. How do we learn that? My time, Rabbi Lezer. How's Rabbi Lezer now? Says shavta it Shabbos lashem. Cloud. It's a general principle, and it's in a positive pasuk. The land should rest. It's positive. Then it says elsewhere, "Sodcha lo sizor kamacha lo sizmor." Don't plant your field and don't prune your vineyard. Prat. That's the specification. As a rev as oimer, planting and pruning bichlalo you. They included it in the rest. The lama yatsu, why they come out, lahaki shalem, to draw the following parallel to them, to say Ella. The word Ella is a little bit out of place, but Ella maza rev azomer yuchodim, just like planting and pruning are unique. Shema avoida boretz, they are work in the land, uveilon and in trees. Af enli dovishu avoida boretz uveilon. Again, the Ella is a little bit out of place, but it means anything which is work in a tree or in a land or in the tree, including charisha. So here the lavin, even though the generality was an assay, and the lavin and the specifications are in los assay, we say that these lavin are mechalik, and they mean that each and every possible unit of land work is one for which you can be liable during Shemitah. And Rabbi Yochanan is not the case. Rabbi Yochanan says these can't be specifics vis-a-vis the generality, because the generality is positive and these specifics are negative. So therefore you don't have any generality to work with here. And that's why only specific activities mentioned in the Torah is prohibited are prohibited, and that's why plowing is not prohibited. Okay? So that's why he says, Ma'avele Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, how does Rabbi Yochanan do them? Rabbi Yochanan says, Shnei Dvarim, there are two specific things. Shnei Dvarim sheyotzu min ha-klal, and these two things which came out of the klal, I think it should be Eina Chokim. They don't divide the klal, again, because the klal is an assay, and these are los assays. Right. I'll die to the Rebbe Lezer. According to Rebbe Lezer, again, I want to take out the word Einar, but really, it's Bitmiya. I'll die to Rebbe Lezer Chokin. According to Rebbe Lezer, Take, how are they mechalik? Makes no sense. Even according to Rebbe Lezer, how can you learn the generality specification? It's apples and oranges. The generality is positive, the specification is negative. So it says, well, you know what, you're right. Islay lachlokin on chokim. Rabbi Lezer agrees they don't divide up. Because the truth is, when they divide up, what does it mean? It means you have a car race and you want to apply the plug in the car race the specific prohibition, so it divides up the car race. But there's nothing to divide up over here. The one is the mitzvah saseh. The other lo sasehs. What are the lo sasehs dividing up? Rather, he also have a different principle here. Hololamid melamdid.
we can work with aseis and los aseis in order to build an extrapolation. It's not called chokin. It's not called dividing up a prohibition. It's called extrapolating a new one. That we can do. Says Mardad Rabbi Yochanan Malabdin. Why Taka can't be extrapolated based on this generality, even though it's an assay, and the specification which are alive in, says more precisely for that reason. Shani, that's exactly the point. The sheklau b'asei uprat below sasei. The cloud is by positive and the prat is by negative. You can't craft extrapolations which are comprised of a hybrid of positive and negative. You can craft positive extrapolations and negative extrapolations, but not a hybrid. Al Daidi Rebbe Eliezer, according to Rebbe Eliezer, now the Bnei Moshe changes the girsa here. You don't really have to change it. You can just learn Yerushalmi always speaks backwards. But I'll change it like the Bnei Moshe. Al Daidi Rebbe Eliezer, lo sasei melamed al asei. A lo sasei can teach you something about an asei. The truth is you don't really have to do it at all. Let's leave it the way it is. You can build a hybrid. The asay allows you to extrapolate from lo sasei and you derive the prohibition on plowing. But not vice versa. The lo sasei does not teach you anything about the asay, meaning the lo sasei can't be mechalik, can't divide up an asay. There's no such thing. A lo sasei divides up an onesh, not a mitzvah say. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you can't do either of them. Now, the next thing, I'll die to Rabbi Yochanan. Now, the Gilin and Fran Shaita, so both changes, and I will change it like they do. I'll die to Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, nicha, it's good. Mutar lachba boros sichin umoros. You can dig holes in the ground in Shemitah if it's not for plowing. Why? Because the Torah specifically prohibits plowing. It's not explicit in the Torah, but it's a specific derivation from the other prohibitions. And this is the digging holes, not a prohibition. But al daitet Rabbi Yochanan, ma'u lachbor boros sichin umoros. According to Rabbi Yochanan, can you dig holes in the ground? Now, the coordinator learns that here begins an answer. I don't see that at all. I think the next line is also part of the question. Kishem shem lami iser kachlin heter lo yimoldu. Just like we have it's vague vis-a-vis what's usher. In other words, we can't extrapolate a new prohibition from what's prohibited because we can't configure that say and lav to work together. It works in the other way as well. It's also chumrah. You don't know what precisely is mutter because you don't know where the asay ends. Just like you don't know to where to extend the prohibition, you don't know to where, and so therefore you can't definitively prohibit it, plowing. You don't know to where to limit the positive command of persisting of resting the earth. Therefore, perhaps you're not even allowed to dig holes during Shemitah in the earth. Maybe it's part of the resting earth. According to the Rabbi Eliezer, that the asay and lo asay work in tandem. So what defines the asay is what's defined by the lo asay. So if lo asay is working the land for growth, for cultivation, so there is no asay against digging holes either. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that they don't work together. So maybe the lav is taka only cultivation, but maybe the asay is even simple digging in the land. It's an amazing concept, but the taka leaves it shver. Okay, we don't know. Amei Rabbi Kartigno. Rabbi Kartigno said, "Time Rabbi Yochanan. How does Rabbi Yochanan know they don't get a flog on charisha? On plowing for a different reason. He has a different reason." It says 6 years you should plant your field. Lo b'shvis, not during Shemitah. 6 years you should prune your vineyard. Lo b'shvis, not during Shemitah. Kol lo saseh. Now this infers that any of these activities, any other activities, all other activities are prohibited during Shemitah, right? However, it says do this for 6 years and do that for 6 years,
what you shouldn't do is say any prohibition which is derived from a positive command, I say who has the status of a positive command, in other words, any prohibition what you can't do in Shemitah, including Charisha, is derived, backhanded from the positive command of working the other 6 years. So therefore, it doesn't have the status of a lav, and therefore they can't get Malchus. Okay? Rabbi Yirmiyah Omer of Erbaseh here says, based on this, you do transgress a mitzvah, say, if you plow during Shemitah. Papal Amgum base. Rabbi Yossi Rafilu Basei Bar. It says not even an assay. It's not even an assay. Because if it said, plow the other 6 years, we derive from this, and don't plow during Shemitah, that would be an asayah, below asayah, bon mikor asay, negative command derived from a positive command, and we'd say, it's a mitzvah asay, but you don't get flogged. But it doesn't say plow the other 6 years. It says plant and prune the other 6 years. So you can't derive an asay vis-a-vis plowing. If that's the case, it should be, it says, Ephraim says in the bottom, it should say, V'laida mila ksiv, the shofar Shabbos Hashem. So why does it say the land should rest? The taka only applies to the lavin of Shemitah. The resting is the say, it means don't plow, don't prune, but it is not even a mitzvah to say to desist from plowing. So according to him, it's zichah would be mutter to dig holes according to Rabbi Yochanan during Shemitah, because he holds the mitzvah say works in tandem with the mitzvah lo say, but only to the extent of what's specifically mentioned. There's no right of extrapolation like Rebbe Lezer extrapolates. Now, here the Pnei Moshe throws in the word Yochel, and there's a fragment from a brisa which is not here, which is in Moed Katan. The fragment is a quote, actually. It's a new statement. Yochel you leikin al Tosefes. Do you get flogged on Tosefes? That's the fragment from the brisa. Now Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar have machlokas what this brisa means, consistent with their machlokas over here. Rabbi Yochanan Pasar Masisi, Rabbi Yochanan explains this brisa. Yochel you lokin aidei charisha b'shviz. Do you get flogged if you plow during Shemitah? Because Tosefes is an additional thing packed onto Shemitah. Plowing during Shemitah is a Tosefes on Shemitah, because Shemitah itself, plow is not prohibited by the Torah. And the price will go on to say, as we'll see momentarily, you don't get Malchus on that. That's Rabbi Yochanan. She tells you don't get flogged for Charisha during Shemitah. Hare Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Lezer pasar masnisa. Rabbi Lezer learns the brisa. He holds Charisha during Shemitah's takolav, and Yitaka would get Malchus. So he says it's talking about Tosefes Shviz literally. The 2 weeks, actually the 2 possible times before Rosh Hashanah when he has to desist from planting Erev Shviz. Is Tani, now those who learned, the end of the same brisa is that the brisa is Talmud Loimar, the word Talmud Loimar is missing, so puts it in, Talmud Loimar Sheshonit is Rasodecho, the Sheshonit is Mor Karmecho. That the pasuk which teaches you that you don't get flogged for that Tosefes is 6 years you should plant, and 6 years you should prune. These tiny, those who learned that the pasuk which is brought down by the brisa, Sotcha lo sizra, do not plant your field, the gomer. Madamam Sheshanim, he who says that the brisa continues with that pasuk of 6 years you should plant. Misayeh, this is a proof. Now here it says according to Rabbi Yochanan, and I can make it work. But I'm going to learn how to try to so flips the names. That would be a proof to Rabbi Elazar. And because it says here that 6 years you're allowed to plant, meaning 6 years right up to Rosh Hashanah Mamish. All 6 years. So it's all 6 years. So you clearly don't get flogged until Sefer Shvius, right? And he who focuses on what the specific prohibitions mentioned in the Torah is, that's Messiah Rabbi Yochanan, that's proof to Rabbi Yochanan, because it means, it says don't plant, it says don't prune, but it doesn't say anything about plowing. Plowing you don't get flogged. Okay. Says the Gemara. Now, of course, the next question is Masnisa Pliga Rabbi Lazar. The following brisa argues on Rabbi Lazar. What seems to argue Rabbi Lazar? The following brisa says, it says, Yisharmel below say, anytime it says in Torah, be careful, it's a negative command. Pen, blessed, is also below say, it's a negative command. See, it says, Shom Taleh Secha, it says, in Eretz, in Yerushalmi, there you should bring your olos, Shom Taseh, and then you should make them. Shom Taleh Zu Aliyah, there you should bring them, that's bringing them up. V'shom Taseh, that's putting them on the Mizbeach. V'shom Taseh, and there you should make them, Zu Ashchita Vazrika, that's about the slaughter and the throwing the blood. Ma'aliyah Shubaseh, the aliyah, putting them atop the altar, is a mitzvah aseh. Harei below saseh. It also has a low saseh attached to it. Afshchita, the zrika, shein ba'aseh, you below saseh. So do shchita and zrika, which have an aseh, are also low saseh. In other words, they both, the aliyah has an aseh and lo saseh, so do shchita and zrika, which is connected to it, has an aseh and lo saseh. But only because they're juxtaposed in the pasuk together. Begin to see Shom Ta'aseh, V'Shom Ta'aleh, V'Shom Ta'aseh. It's because they're connected in the pasuk. For you look, see Shom Ta'aleh, V'Shom Ta'aseh. If they weren't connected, Ein Aseh M'Lamed Lo Saseh, V'Lo Saseh M'Lamed Aseh. It sounds like the only reason we know that we can make this hybrid and say the Aseh and Lo Saseh by Shchutei Chutz, by not sacrificing outside the Beis HaMikdash, are connected, is because of juxtaposition in the pasuk. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to extrapolate back and forth. Ma avad lo should be Rabbi Elazar. What does Rabbi Elazar do with that? Who says you extrapolate back and forth regardless? So it says, it's a good question. I'll tell you a very simple answer. Shalo Tomar, you shouldn't say Kemad Tamer Gabi Shabbos, like you say by Shabbos. Chofar Choratz Knots, that where you dig a hole in by digging, or by running a peg through the land, or by pushing a peg into the ground. In Chayvach, it's only one malacha. It's all the toloda of chofer, of digging. So too, the kavasah shochat ve'elo lo yechai v'lachos. So too, if you slaughter and put atop an altar outside the Beis HaMikdash, perhaps you're only liable for one prohibition, not two. That's why it's coming to tell us. That's why the Torah comes and tells us both here, that both have an asay and both have a lo asay, in order to be chayav on each one independently. In other words, he learns the brisa. It's a little bit difficult, but he learns the brisa that it means that if not, yes, we could have made a hybrid of asay and lo asay, and learned that there's a lo asay on both because there's an asay on both. But then it would have been one lo asay. It would have gotten only one flogging or one chiyuv korban for both the slaughter and the putting atop of the altar. So therefore, we made through the juxtaposition, we derive that no, each one has its own love. All right, I'm not sure exactly how wonderfully it fits in the brisa, but it's late and we won't get into that right now. Rabbi Zia, Rabbi Chia, now we just get into a very simple peripheral machlokas. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Zia, Rabbi Chia, Barashim Shem Kahana. Rabbi Zia, they said, Hanoter b'Shabbos, some of you planted Shabbos Chai Mishum Zreis Chai, because if you plant a tree, you're liable because of planting, because planting includes planting trees. Zomer Zir says, and if you prune a tree, also it's also like planting, because it makes the tree grow better. Not of Zomer b'Shabbos.
So what happens if you plant and you prune on Shabbos? You plant the tree and you prune the tree. Adaiti Kana, according to Rav Kana, Chayiv Stein. You're liable too, right? One for planting, one for pruning. Adaiti Rabbi Zira holds pruning is a form of planting, and Chayiv you're only liable one. Says, but no! Kluma ma Rabbi Zira, the Rabbi Zira say, Elizomer Kinotea. He held that pruning is like planting. But Dilma Notea Kizomer, but is he hold like that planting is like pruning? In other words, pruning has both. But it's not only liable in one. Pruning has both elements. But it has its own element of pruning as well. So therefore, he also holds your chayiv too, right? So therefore, that's not true what you just said, right? Says the Gemara, Hakol Bichlal Zriya. Continuing the story, everything was including in planting. Yotza Zmira lahachmir alatzma. Zmira, pruning, is separated out in the Torah. It says don't prune, to be machmir, to tell you that pruning is a separate thing, right? Because it's machmir, that's also zmira. Abochim Mishum is already let the guy off the hook because of planting. Of course, you chayav on both. Heavy lo shani and nota b'zomar b'Shabbos. So there it makes no difference when a guy plants and prunes on Shabbos. Bein al daiti kaina, bein al daiti Rabbi Zira, chayav shnayim. According to everybody, you're liable for two prohibitions. And we'll stop here for this evening.